My name is Beth Snodgrass, and I am the founder of the Product Advisory Collective. And today I'm presenting on a topic that I've been focused on for the past year. I'll be talking about why trust matters in product and how to go about assuring more trust in product. So background on myself. So over the past 20 plus years of my career, the key themes have been impact, policy, and product. So I started off in nonprofits, and then I went for a master's in policy, and from there spent about 7 years in the corporate social responsibility governance space. I started building product as an entrepreneur, and I've been building product and consulting startups on product for about 10 years. And I spent most of my career in highly regulated industries, so energy and healthcare. I consider my expertise to be at that intersection of responsible business and tech, or social responsible practices and technology and implementation. And beyond my master's in policy and how that interacts with product, for the past year, I've been researching AI governance and responsible AI, and come to the conclusion that trustworthy AI is the outcome of well-implemented safe AI or responsible AI initiatives. And in the coursework certifications I've done in institutions like Oxford and UPenn and Michigan, I recognize that there is a significant gap in the guidance or best practices for operationalizing and productizing the theories, the frameworks, and the policies. AI is so new that there's not a lot of precedence for how best to govern. So we have frameworks and we have policies and standards that are emerging, evolving. And if you've been paying attention to what's going on in the US, you'll know what I mean. A lot of back and forth about how best or not to regulate AI. There is this need for a greater focus on how to operationalize and productize trustworthy AI. And so today, what we can talk about is why trust matters, defining trust and how it grows, the dynamic between product and trustworthy AI, and how to make trust part of a product strategy. And because there's a lot of content that I have, and I'm sure you all have your own experiences and interests, thought I'd ask before we get going, what topic is most of interest? Does anything stand out to you as being more important, or you have more questions about?
No, this is terrific. This is exactly why I came.
Great. Why trust matters is a pretty big topic in and of itself, but if you've been paying attention to any of the media, you'll see that there's a significant issue with trust. It's the number one barrier to adoption. I encourage you to look at different articles that are out there. There's a ton of information about it. On this slide, two of the examples are about healthcare and finance. And like I said earlier, I do believe that these highly regulated industries will be the leaders in terms of building and bringing to market trustworthy AI. Healthcare in particular, I believe will be the leader because patients' lives are at stake. And there's just a greater responsibility that providers have when adopting and implementing AI. There was a study or survey that Edelman did in October, 5,000 people across 5 different countries. And there's basically been an upward tick in distrust. And in the US, you can see there's the largest rejection of AI and the lowest trust. It's interesting that not only does US rank the lowest out of the 5 as far as having trust in AI, younger generations, which are typically early adopters and more tech savvy than older generations, only 4 in 10 people in the 18 to 34 age group trust AI. Their number one finding is trust is the conduit to adoption, and it rises particularly with Gen AI when the solutions clarify complexity, which makes a lot of sense when you think about how we use LLMs. And another finding that I thought was interesting or really important for people who are building and deploying AI is that 80% of, or nearly 80% of people are likely to trust their peers, their family, or their friends when it comes to recommendations on Gen AI. And there's less trust in the experts, so the technologists, the CEOs, and governments. And since we talked about the Edelman's trust barometer, I thought I'd first talk about how trust typically would scale for an innovation or a new tech solution. So there's this dynamic between institutional protections and social acceptance. And this applies for a wide variety of things beyond AI. So if you think of the invention of the automobile, there's a dynamic between people coming around to the idea that they wanted to use cars instead of the horse and buggy, and that there were government protections like safe roads, speed limits, seatbelts, all these different things that basically assure people that if they do have a car and they are driving a car, that other people will be responsible with their cars as well. And so what's happening in the US is that there's this unspoken strategy or shadow strategy that AI companies are pursuing a virality first approach to adoption. So similar to social media, like how LinkedIn grew with network effects and Facebook grew with peer pressure and social excitement over the social networking. And so there's seems to be this assumption or expectation that a lot of AI solutions can grow and gain social acceptance without some institutional protections, given what we're seeing play out in the regulatory space. But I think overall, what we're going to see is that in time, this dynamic is going to need to play out for there to be sustainable acceptance and sustainable use of a variety of AI solutions. When it comes to defining trust, there's actually a variety of definitions out there. And this definition is, I guess, one of the best definitions. So, willingness of a party to be vulnerable to the actions of another based on the expectation that the other will perform an action that's important to the individual trusting. Other definitions include the willingness to perform actions regardless of the other party's ability to monitor or control. So in this instance, I think of a parent telling a teenager that they're not going to be home that night, but they expect the teenager to be home by midnight. And that requires a high level of trust, right? And then the degree to which a user or other stakeholder has confidence that a product will behave as intended. And there's a lot of different types of trust that come into play with AI. It's technical and it's organizational, and there's social trust. And all of these types of trust are the types of trust that people building products and responsible for deploying products, that they have to basically understand and manage. And then another aspect is that trust is dynamic and it's contextual and it's modular. And the more I understand the characteristics of trustworthiness and how to assess trustworthiness of AI, the more similarities I see between how we decide to trust other human beings. If you think about it, there's all these different professionals that we have trust in. So physicians, bankers, and you could look at any media story to see that just because somebody is a physician who may be trusted for being a great practitioner, it doesn't necessarily mean they should be trusted as an investor, right? There's different contexts that they're trusted in, and it's the same with AI. Particularly if you think about agentic AI, where there are these defined tasks that agents are designed to complete. We do it largely unconsciously when we decide to trust other professionals or other individuals, but it is a modular assessment. And so we can assess the trustworthiness of different AI solutions in a similar way. And for me, at least, it's helpful to think of trust as not being at a static point in time, and that it's part of a lot of different criteria and factors. And so in this image, you could think of this as one AI solution is purple ball, and then the yellow dot is where the trustworthiness is for its end users. Basically, trust is often considered something that's fuzzy or in some contexts even touchy-feely, but there is social science and there are ways to measure and monitor it. So overall, a key aspect that drives the need to understand and decode trust is risk. Risk has been around a long time in technology. Risk exists for all businesses, right? And it's pretty well defined what the risks are for software, what the risks are for data. And we have an understanding of AI and ML risks, but it's not well defined and it will continue to evolve. There's still a lot that we're obviously learning about AI, and AI is continuing to evolve. So this aspect of risk is a key driver for why it's important to increase trust and ensure trust. And so I mentioned this already, that trustworthy AI is the outcome of productizing or operationalizing safe AI or responsible AI or AI governance. And different companies will talk about these things in different ways. What I believe is most important is that for a company to adopt responsible AI, it's most important that it makes sense within the context of their culture and their current operating systems. Really contextualizing it to how they already operate is important. And so there's 5 main trustworthiness characteristics. Now, certain standards or other groups may define 7 or 8 key characteristics, but I've identified 5, which I believe fit very well into the operating context in the US and from my experience in healthcare. And within those 5, there's over 40 sub-characteristics, and different AI solutions will need to focus on different characteristics in order to increase adoption, in order to strengthen their go-to-market. And so the dynamic between product and trustworthy AI, I believe, is quite strong, because when there is trust in an AI solution, you can accelerate your go-to-market, you can increase product adoption. These are some of the aspects of that. Does anyone have questions about it or comments?
No, except to say it's right on. I mean, this really resonates well with my research. I can really see how well this dovetails very well.
I'm super excited. Like, it's so on point. It's so poignant what you're sharing about trust and AI. And I think how interesting it is for me to see a trend in a lot of new products and a lot of new founders today building in public. What I'm seeing is that's a way that founders and their products are showing more trust with their audience to say, this is how I'm building it. This is what it's built on. But it gives people a way to know what to expect. Something that I'm curious about is, how does the more uncertainty and the more information that we have in our ever-changing technology environment, why trust is gaining more importance, or it's more of a need because there's so much uncertainty?
You're curious what's driving the increase in interest on trust from an interest standpoint, like it's in the media a lot, or from a tech perspective, people actually talking about it and prioritizing it?
I guess how people want to lean on trust, the more uncertainty there is.
Yeah.
And it's more of a general inquiry, more of a general curiosity, but I guess it's something that I'm noticing. And maybe it's a little bit off topic.
It's not a topic. I mean, in a sense, it's a question I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about, but I'll tell you what comes to mind. We are talking about AI both augmenting and replacing human beings, right? And AI is being used as replacement for therapy. It's being used as a replacement for friends by people, right? We're seeing these kinds of behaviors. And I think that in reality, trust is still such a critical glue and component of our everyday lives and our work lives. And if AI is going to come in and take on human-like roles, there's something innate in us that we want to, or we need to be able to trust it in the way that we trust humans. So that's my unofficial first thought, but I'm not an expert on the psychology of it. But the other piece is that you're right. Like when there is so much uncertainty, when there are no rules, generative AI is a black box in many ways. Explainability, interpretability, these are big issues. And if we can't understand how something works, if we can't be sure whether it's going to hallucinate or confabulate, and there's all this uncertainty, you're right. Like we do need to develop and understand the areas where to trust and where not to trust. I like how a colleague of mine talked about implementing or their governance program and how like his goal was to get people to develop trust with an AI solution first, similar to how you would develop trust with a human being first. The way we work best with humans is by developing a trusted relationship. And then we don't hold their feet to the fire for them to be absolutely 100% accurate and perfect and robotically consistent, right? We have grace and we have room for error and we can question and we can challenge, right? We don't expect human beings to be infallible. And his approach to governance was similar in that he said it's important to lay this foundation of trust so that we can allow for error and a more productive, healthy work relationship. What are the aspects of AI, a particular AI solution in a particular context that we can fully trust? And then what are the aspects that we need to check? So daily use of LLMs, it's thought partnership. We don't outsource all of our thinking and writing to AI because it's not there yet. We can't fully trust it in that way. But we give it room for error.
Well, there are two unfortunate things right now about AI in healthcare. One is that this is a new technology that is coming at a time when trust generally within the healthcare sector is at a low point. And then put it on top of that, that it's a magic black box that even clinicians don't quite understand yet and are worried about. We know that there are disparities baked into our existing data. And so the opportunity for AI to replicate that at scale and speed risk doing real harm to people.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, it really makes what you're talking about much more important. What you're doing is more vitally important than I would have known before I did this research recently. And by the way, I would say that any company developing or any group using this technology had better get this act together because they're going to be in court before long.
Yeah, two things I will say to that. One is that what AI does is it shines a light or it holds a mirror to all of the existing problems that ecosystems and companies have had. So in healthcare, there are massive data issues. For example, interoperability, huge bottleneck for innovation, quality issues, right? So the reality is until companies and the ecosystem, quite frankly, can get the house more in order, it's not going to be ready for a variety of AI solutions because they will only scale the problems, to your point. Companies are talking about how context is the currency in AI. Basically, they're saying, oh, it really matters that AI understand your company, your organizational structure and policies and customer context and all these things. To me, this is obvious as a product person. You really have to understand your end users and your workflows and your algorithms, and the puzzle pieces have to fit together. And I feel like the first wave of AI adoption has just been like, AI is just genius, let's adopt, without really thinking through context and how important that is and the different scenarios that AI can be effective in and the ones that can't be. So I think we're still in the early days of companies even understanding what's important to focus on to be able to adopt. If people aren't familiar, traditionally it's product engineering design that make up a three-legged stool in organizations, and the product person is the translator across functions, but they're particularly the translator between engineering and business objectives, or engineering and the customer. And so a lot of the things that are essential for companies to create or invest in responsible, safe AI are things that product people already do. In a PwC survey last year, the top reasons that executives would invest in responsible AI already align with what product people already do. So differentiation, risk mitigation, building trust. And the reasons that executives would adopt responsible AI also align with key roles of product people. So the customer experience, facilitating innovation, improving integration. And given the moment we're in, what I think is telling is that most product people don't even know what responsible AI is. And they don't know how it applies to their work. There aren't standards, there's opaque models, they don't get guidance. So it's a very small fraction of 20% that actually have incentives or clarity on how their roles are relevant to and contributing to responsible AI. And so I believe that there does need to be more of this proactive approach to bringing product people into roles that are about driving towards more trustworthy AI, because the core responsibilities of product people already align with what's essential to productize or operationalize responsible AI. And product itself as a function has been going through an existential moment over the past, I would say, 2 years. As far as making trust part of product strategy, there's a lot that companies developing AI and deploying AI can do in terms of AI governance. And I'm not going to get into all of this today, but I did do a benchmark study comparing how different large AI companies are structuring and implementing AI governance along all of these lines. When it comes to product specifically, because product people are at that intersection between engineering and the customer, or engineering and the business interests, I believe that what we need to see more of is a focus on discovering the trustworthiness characteristics that matter to end users. AI evals have been around for a while. They're an approach, they're a process, they're a tool that is used to assess AI technically. So the technical performance of AI. So things like latency, error rates. Increasingly, product people have been stepping into AI eval roles, and some companies are using AI evals as an engine for product growth, for generative growth for the company. Because if you add on additional characteristics to evaluate, you can really get a stronger understanding of your users and what they need, and build stronger moats, stronger product market fits. So basically, what I believe is going to be important is that trustworthiness characteristics are evaluated in AI evals. And depending on the company, some companies may be doing this to a certain extent, like especially for obvious things like security and kind of these make or break issues that would prevent someone from being a continuous user of your solution. And because AI evals are essentially becoming this growth engine for products, they're basically like the cousin of product-led growth, if you're familiar with that term, and they can have these flywheel effects for product growth. So I see them as being really important tools for continuous discovery about what trustworthiness characteristics are critical to end users and customers. And I think that the AI evals can be done in a collective way, and they should be done in a collective way, because trust is this attitude. It can be a perception, it could be based on evidence, but because there's this attitudinal aspect to it, getting user feedback in a collective way, I think is really important.
If you're analyzing AI, the technical aspects of AI, and at the end of the game, we're about creating a better outcome for the patient. So is that being baked in to the assessment that they'll do when they do their evaluation?
So again, this is also why context matters, and the answer is depends. So a lot of digital health med tech solutions aren't outcomes focused anyways. When I think of outcomes, I think of improved health outcomes that are measurable or clearly definable in some way. So like lowering hemoglobin A1C and eliminating or reducing risk of cardiovascular incidents. And so it depends on what the technology is, what kind of data it's collecting, and who it's interfacing with. So in healthcare, ambient technology, ambient AI solutions have been the most, say, accepted and had the most adoption. And there's very logical reasons for that. But there are other solutions where the outcomes are evaluated separately from the actual AI technology, or they could occur much later down the line from the actual engagement or interface with the tech. So I don't think I really answered your question, except to say that it really depends on what the solution is and the data and the engagement.
I would just say that based on what I've heard here so far, what I'm getting is that the product manager you're talking about is not somebody in healthcare, it's somebody in the tech, it's in the AI company. So they're coming at this from a technology mindset rather than a clinical mindset.
I wouldn't say that maybe 10, 15 years ago, but nowadays, a lot of the healthcare focused tech does require product people to understand the healthcare ecosystem, the end users, and all the regulations around this. I actually even see more companies looking for clinical product people.
That would reassure me. Yeah. Otherwise, the cultures are very different.
Yes. But there's also very different cultures within healthcare. Like there's very resource oriented cultures and resource oriented clinicians. And then there's very commercially driven providers, right? So yeah, it's true. I think there just has to be the right balance of technical and either clinical or patient focused skills.
I am a product person, traditionally in product marketing and product design, transitioning over to more of a product management role. I see a potential in AI showing us where our biases and how we think. What I find really exciting about that is that when we understand how we think or how an AI could be created, it gives us more empowerment of choice and safety and predictability, which is key to creating trust. So I think this is why it was great to join today.
Well, I'll just give you one piece of data from my research. We stumbled on something that we called a trust gap. The greatest trust gap was with insurance company reviewers, which you can understand if you've heard anything about prior authorization. The second greatest was with Gen AI technical platform developers. And everything that you're talking about here is just like, this is right on. They really need to master this because there's going to be pushback.
Absolutely. There's huge trust gaps, and that is the number one barrier to adoption. And what I want to do is to help people understand how to decode the type of trust that their product needs to engender, that their users or their customers of their product need in order to adopt. Because there's all these trade-offs when it comes to AI. So you can lean heavily on privacy. That's important in healthcare, but at the expense of transparency. So it's important to understand how to balance the trade-offs and what users and beneficiaries of your solution really need. Where the rubber hits the road is what I want to help tech companies and also tech adopters better understand.
Well, this is certainly a sweet spot. That's absolutely for sure. You're really onto something. They need this. They really need this. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for joining.